In today's Math 8 lesson, we will be looking at triangles, specifically right triangles, and we will be using the Pythagorean theorem, and we're going to find the length of the hypotenuse. So we need to know the keywords here. What does the hypotenuse mean? What is the Pythagorean theorem? And we have to apply it to this triangle. This symbol right here in the corner shows a perpendicular symbol, and it represents that this triangle is a right triangle. A right triangle means that this angle is measuring 90 degrees. So the first thing I need to recognize is that I have a right triangle, and it's going to take me a second to write it out because I have to use either my finger or the mouse here. So right triangle is present with that symbol showing that it is, that's the symbol showing it's perpendicular, it's 90 degrees. Right triangle, it has a angle that measures 90 degrees. Measure of this angle is equal to 90 degrees. I'm not supposed to say 90. And that is my degree symbol right there. All right. On here, I have to know the Pythagorean theorem. The Pythagorean theorem is a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. My a is a leg, and this could be my a, that could be my a, either one. The side that is across from the right angle is my hypotenuse. So I'm going to label this with a leg, and hypotenuse. So let me just pause it because it takes me a minute just to write that. In order to complete this activity, we're going to need a calculator, and we'll probably also need some scrap paper. As I mentioned on the Google Doc, those are the supplies that will be needed. Over here, I can substitute in, so a squared is a leg squared, so I can take either the 15 and put it here and substitute in, or I could have taken the 8, but it's one or the other. So on here, I'm going to go with 15. I'm putting in 15 and squaring it. Those are my parentheses. And on the next part here, I'm taking my 8 and I'm putting that in, substituting that in for the other leg and squaring that. And then I'll, for hypotenuse, they use the letter C here, and that is customary for the formula, so I will leave that as C squared. So we have one equation, one unknown. We should be able to solve for that following the rules of the orders of operations here. So if I look at this, I will probably jot that down on the side as well as a guideline, just so if you've forgotten how to solve something. But these parentheses are not representing, like when you go through, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, this is just representing exponents here. I'm just putting the parentheses around because I'm taking 15 and squaring it. And if I didn't have the parentheses here, that would have been okay as well. I just used that to substitute the number in. But this will be 15 squared, this will be an 8 squared, and then we'll continue on. I'm just going to jot down, in case you've forgotten, the rules of the order of operation. So with your calculator, take 15, squaring it. You have a choice. You can use the y to the x power button on your calculator, or you could also use just 15 times 15 because it's two quantities of 15. I'm going to write it down here twice just so you recognize it's not 30. That's a common mistake and you don't want to do that. It's going to be 200 something. So on here you're going to take 15. I'll write it out this way just so you don't have to do it every time this way, but just so you recognize what you are the two numbers that you'd be multiplying together or taking 15 and squaring it. 15, I'm on here looking at, and I did the exponents. This is what I'm working on right now, the exponents. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. On here, the E is the exponents, and I'm doing the exponents from left to right. Or if we encounter multiplication, we're going from left to right. It could be division or multiplication, but on this problem, it's just encountering multiplication only. So on here, 15 times 15 along with 8 times 8. All right, is equal to c squared. So on here, 15 times 15, if you punch it into your calculator, I believe it's 225. Let me double check that. And yes, I have 225. And 8 times 8, who knows it? Anyone know the answer? Yeah, you're right. 64. 64. On here, next step is to add or subtract left to right. So I've done the multiplication. I'm on to adding and subtracting. I still have the side on the right of the equal sign as c squared. We're solving for the hypotenuse, so let's not lose track of what we're actually doing. 225 plus 64, add those together. So again, use your calculator. For some reason, if you don't have a calculator, if you line it up vertically, you should be all set as well. So 64 on the bottom part, and added together, 5 plus 4 is 9. In the 10th position here, 10th position, excuse me, is 2 plus 6 is 8. And the last part here is 2. So 289. So I get the left side is 289. That is not my answer, though. I don't want to actually put 289 in my answer space here and then submit it. So this is equal to c squared. Now on this part here, when I have that, it is in centimeters. Everything was in centimeters. I'm not going to actually write centimeters right here because it's already written in the answer space provided. So on here, when I go through and solve it, I haven't solved for c. They want us to find c. So basically you have to find what two numbers that are the same is going to give us 289. So what we're doing is we're taking the square root to the left side and a square root to the right side. And if I look at that, a radical 289 is the same as, so you want to punch that into your calculator if you don't have it already memorized. But this is one that is pretty standard. So on here, I believe the answer comes out to be 17. Again, double check it because you're taking the square root of 289. So, is 2. And yeah, 17 is the answer. So let me grab my cursor and substitute that number in over here as 17 and see if I've answered everything. Let's read through real quick again. We found the hypotenuse. I've shown my work here on the side. You use scrap paper or a calculator. And on here, I'm putting in the answer of 17. So hopefully it says that we're correct. Yes. And it says we're brilliant, actually. So very good. And we're going to the next problem. Let me clear this one out, erase that off. All right, and here again, we have another picture of a triangle. So you're doing the same concept on these all in this section that is R.1. They're all looking for the hypotenuse. So the first one should be a guideline for you to go through and solve it. That's the actual lesson. We're going to also learn to find when we're having a missing leg. So let's just set this one up. I'm not solving the whole thing for you as you're going to go through and do this as well. But let me set up what we have here. So when I look at this, I want to use my formula because we're using Pythagorean theorem because we see this symbol right there. It's the right triangle symbol. You can only use Pythagorean theorem if you have a right triangle. So we're using the formula again, a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. Okay, leg squared plus leg squared is equal to hypotenuse squared. So on here we're substituting in, this happens to be a leg, and you'll substitute that in either A or B, and wherever you did not put the 5, you'll put the other number in A or B. And then we're going to solve for the c squared side, the hypotenuse. All right, let me pause that for a second. Okay, so put in your 5 squared right here, along with your 12 squared right there. You don't have to use the millimeters in the actual equation. And then the last part is figuring out what the hypotenuse is equal to. So you're going through the orders of operations again, doing the exponents. So 5 squared, write it down. The 12 squared, write it down. and then equal to c squared. So solve for that part, and then you're going to submit your answer shortly just to see if you have it correct. If it gives you an error message, or for some reason when you go to put the answer in, if it says it's incorrect, it will provide you with feedback and how to work the problem out correctly in case you did not produce the correct answer for 5 squared or for 12 squared. Okay, so go ahead and give it your best shot on that one, and then submit your answer. All right, I'm going to look for another problem to see if it happens to be one that has right triangles in the like a 3, 4, 5 triangle. So let me look through the rest and see if there's one there, so I can quickly discuss that, and then we'll move on to the other problems where we're actually solving for a leg instead of a hypotenuse. All right, so I looked ahead and I couldn't actually find a problem that was a 3, 4, 5 triangle. I found a different one. But before I move on the last problem that you did, you should have taken and had 25. 5 squared was 25, and then you also had the 12 squared was 144 squared. The 12 squared gives you 144. So when you added them together, you should have gotten 169 and then taken the square root of that number. So your answer was 13. I know I gave you directions at the bottom if you didn't realize you had it correct. This one is the same kind of setup. And looking at it, I have same formula, so a squared. And don't get tricked just because you see the decimal. Don't think it becomes that much more complicated. It really is the same setup. Okay, and then we'll move on to the solving for a leg instead. So looking at this, I have a squared, and it's a 6.6. And then I'll take and square that with 3.9. And oops, my plus sign, I will take and square that as well, is equal to c squared. So on here, because it's a decimal, we'll just take a look at what 6.6 is to the second power. So I have here 6.6 raised to the second power gives me back 43.56. And I also have 3.9 raised to the second power, and that is giving me back 15.21. So you're just taking 3.9 times another 3.9, or you can just raise it to the second power. Whatever you do, don't just double it because that would be incorrect. You can write it down twice and then multiply it. So anyways, on there, that's equal to c squared. So next part is I have to add these two decimals together, and when I go to add them, use your calculator so you don't make an error. You can also write them vertically on the side, and I can do that as well, but it'll take me a second. All right, so as I go to add them together, I have 6 and 1 is 7, and 5 and 2 is 7 again. And I have the decimal place as right there. I have a 3 and a 5 is 8. And then I have a 4 and a 1 is 5. So go ahead. You're going to take that number of 58.77, which is 58 and 77 hundredths. And you're going to square root both sides to get rid of the second degree on this side, so it becomes a normal c instead, and do the same thing to that side. So my c, my hypotenuse, is equal to, what is that come out to equal? 58.7. I'm getting back 7.6, oops, 6, another 6, 1, 5, 9, 4, and it says that we're supposed to round this. We have to round to the nearest tenth. It goes on just a little bit more, 0.4 as well. On here to the nearest tenth. This is my 10th spot. I have to look at the number next to it. This number is larger than a 5, so I have to round this number of the underlined one up to a 7. So I have 7.7. And on here, I need to grab my cursor, so submit my answer here of 7.7, and then we'll move on to the next area. Okay, and we have it correct.